Okay guys, in this video we're about to look at the preferences. Now to open the preferences, you can press Command comma, just like that, or you can go up to the up to File and then open Preferences that way. But I like to use Command comma or Control comma, whichever one. So when you open it up, it'll either be at audio or look and feel. Most people are set to audio, but we're gonna start up here at the top first. So right over here is some basic parameters that you can look through to see what, basically find the exact preference that you want to use. Right down here is the zoom display. It's normally set to 100, which looks like this. But since I'm using a laptop, so I want a little bit smaller screen, so I want a little bit more screen real estate. I'm gonna hit 75. I just kind of like that a little bit better. If you're using like a 4K monitor, you probably want to even have it higher, like maybe set to 150 or something. 4K monitor will have a lot more screen real estate, and you'll be able to be able to see a lot more. So like I said, it all depends too. Maybe you have maybe you're a little bit older and you have a hard time seeing sometimes using your computer. You can zoom in and get it exactly the right way you want. So right here is auto assign track colors. If this is on, it will make a new track color each time you make a new audio track or a new MIDI track. If you don't have this on, you're gonna have a default track color, and that will be selectable from a menu of colors down here. There's a lot of colors to go through. I like having the auto assign track colors on because it helps me stay organized too. When I make something new, it's a different color. You can also make the clip colors different than the track color if you want to, but like I said, staying organized is really important, especially to me, so I like to keep the track colors the same as the clip color. Right here we have the interface preferences, so we can select through a couple of different color types for Ableton. Gives us the Live 9 colors right here. This is the new shade for Ableton 10. But I mean, I don't mind producing with some of these, but I don't know. I just kind of feel like keeping it simple, it works better for me. So that's what I like to have it at. Right here we have our brightness controls. We can make it bright or really dark. This gives us a little bit more flexibility with our color scheme. Right here we can change the color intensity, so we can make it like all kinds of different colors, based on whatever your preference is. But like I said, I like to keep it at the standard. And right here is just some plugin preferences. This is a if you want to have multiple plugins on at the same time on the same screen, you could do that. Or if your screen gets a little cluttered and you like to focus on one plugin at a time, you can click this off. This is what I really like. This auto hides plugins when you click on something else. It's really really helpful. So let's move into audio. This is where we control our ins and outs and our sample rate, and our bit rate and our latency, and this is where we can also test our speakers and our speaker system at different tones. But we'll get into that in a second. Right here, our audio input device. This is where we can select where we want to be recording from. If you're using maybe a USB mic, this is where you would select it from. Or if you're using an interface like me, this is where you would go to select that to start recording. Right here we have our output device. This is what goes out to our to our monitors, our speakers. We want to make sure that our interface is selected because our speakers or monitors are plugged into our interface, and those go and that signal goes from the computer into the interface and out to the monitors. Right here is our input configurations. This is where we select which channels we want Ableton to be paying attention to. 1 and 2, 3 and 4 is what I have selected. And our output configurations right here. Now I'm just using 2 outputs just just my left and right monitors. But if you got more speakers, maybe you have a couple of different speaker sets, this is where you would want to route those in the output configurations. This is our sample rate, so this is basically determines the quality of our overall project. We can select it all the way up to 96,000, but that is it's pretty CPU intensive, and it's going to create some really big audio files, especially if you're bouncing down stems or something, and you're bouncing down every single track in your project. It's going to be a lot of file content, so just keep that in mind. Think of this as like setting the definition of your TV, but not as drastically noticeable. Right here we have latency. Now latency is kind of like a delay. You know, like when you're watching a newscast or something, and there's an interview, but it's done over satellite. You can see like when the reporter will ask the subject the question, and they take like a second to respond. They kind of just sit there in dead silence, and then they respond. That's because of latency. The audio takes a little bit of time to get to that person, and allows them time to respond. So this is kind of like a micro version of that. This is right here where we set our buffer size. This is what's going to determine the amount of latency that there is. So the lower samples you go, the less latency. Here, I'll demonstrate that really fast. So I'm going to record on this track, and I'm going to monitor my voice. So you can hear me talking right now. There's a little bit of latency, just a little bit. But if I go down here to 32 samples, it's virtually no latency at all. It's like my voice coming out and my voice being monitored back to me. If I go up here, lots of latency. I can't even talk. I can't talk like that. It's hard to talk while you're talking back to yourself. Anyways, let me turn this off. This is where you control that. So if you're working with a vocalist and they want to hear themselves singing or speaking or whatever, this is where you would control that latency right here. But just to keep in mind too, the lower you go, the harder your CPU has to work. So just keep that in mind. Right here's our test tone. We can adjust the frequency of that by going up. This is for, like, you know, if you're tuning monitors and you want to kind of dial them in just right, or get the speakers placed in a certain spot of your room where it resonates the best. That's what you use the test tone for. This is our link and Midi section. This is where you would route any Midi devices or control surfaces that you'd want to use when using Ableton. If you plug it in and it's not working, you want to come here and check and make sure it's on the list. And if it's not on the list, you want to make sure that you get a driver installed for that. Right here's our file folder setting. So this is where we can create a project file, like a template project, and then save it right here. Save current set as default. So next time you open up Ableton, that default project will pop up. And right here, this is important right here, Rescan Plugins. So if you download a new plugin and you want to use it right away, and you don't see it here in your plugins folder, go ahead and hit Rescan Plugins, click on another folder, and then click back to the plugins folder. It should show up in there. And right here is where you can set where your plugins are, or your VSTs. This is something I probably wouldn't change because your computer probably has a default process of where they're putting those. But if you have like a special way to, you got your stuff organized, this is where you would change that. This is just our library stuff, like our user library. This is where where it shows the file path of where all that stuff is. I wouldn't mess with these either. This is probably something that you would want to keep at the default setting. All right, record, warp, launch. Now there's a couple of really important things in here. Right here is where we set our recording file type. Now, Ableton has two different types, Wave and AIFF. I like to keep it at Wave, but you can set it to whichever one you'd like to. This is where we control our bit depth. Also, let me see what else. What's important here that we need to talk about? The warping, auto warp lawn samples. I have that on. Some people don't like to have that on, but I have it on just because I like to use drum loops sometimes, and when I drop those in, I like them to be warped exactly to the BPM of my song. Warping is Ableton's way of time stretching samples to fit the BPM of your original song, but some people don't like that. Some people like to do it themselves or time stretch it themselves. It's all up to preference. That's why they call them preferences. Default warp mode. This is your Ableton has a couple of different types of warp modes, and we're not going to get into all of them right away. I have mine set to complex because I like to work with vocals a lot too. Sometimes clients will send me vocals, and they'll want me to fix any time errors in there. And if it's already set to beats mode, when I drop the vocals in there, it doesn't really make for a really clean warping. So I like to go to complex or complex pro. And right here, I think this is off by default now, but it used to be on by default, where it says create fades on clip edges. That means when you drop in a new sample, there will be really short fades on the front and the back end. And this was a nightmare for people who used audio for their drums, because it would just cut off the transient of that kick drum or snare drum, and it'd make it sound really flat. You want to make sure that this is off. I think that's about it for this one. This is our license and maintenance setting. This is where we can set for automatic updates and sending usage data. I have these both on because I like having my Ableton up to date all the time, and I'd like to help out the Ableton people because with the usage data, because I like to have a great product. So, all right, so that is the preferences, guys. I hope you learned a couple of new things there. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.